Currently, 1.5 million Americans are suffering from these diseases. They result from excessive inflammation in the intestines, and they cause ulcerations or tears in the intestines that bleed into the intestines. Now, this is a big problem, right? 1.5 million Americans, but it's increasing every single year, and the age of diagnosis is falling, so now it's being diagnosed in children. I mentioned ulcers that bleed into your intestines. When you have ulcers that bleed into your intestines, it means that potentially you may be bleeding when you go to the bathroom. So this is stressful, scary, and it's painful. And the treatments don't work. So they don't work about half the time. So it's a coin flip as to whether or not the available treatments are going to be able to do anything for you. On top of that, they're expensive. They're very expensive. They're expensive for insurers. They're expensive for the people who need them, and they're especially expensive for people who are uninsured. In many cases, they won't be able to afford them at all. But let's say you're lucky enough to get your hands on the treatments that are out there. What this means for you is that once a month you're going to go to the hospital, you're going to get a needle placed in your arm, and you're going to be pumped full of the drug because they need to circulate in order to function. That means that they're slow acting, so you can be waiting for months to find out if you're going to be one of the lucky 50%. On top of that, these are TNF-alpha blockers, so they knock down the function of your entire immune system, and that leaves you more susceptible to infection. The solution is our patented anti-inflammatory compound. It was discovered and developed here at the John A. Burns School of Medicine. There's already been about $250,000 invested in this discovery and development process, and it works by blocking the inflammatory mediators at the level of the cell. So it will be taken in the form of a pill. That pill would dissolve into the intestines, and it would be delivered exactly where it needs to be to block the inflammation. Now we can do this because we can actually block the communication between activated inflammatory cells and the rest of your cells and prevent the spread of the inflammation. Now, here's a breakdown between the biologic solution and our competitors. Ours would be available orally, so you could take it as a pill. So no needles are necessary. Targeted delivery, it goes to where it needs to go. It doesn't need to be systemic. Fast acting, you don't have to wait around for months to see if it'll work. And we can beat them on the price point significantly. We can make it available for 10% of what the competitors have. And even if we couldn't beat them on the price point, we'd still be the solution based upon these other factors. The company was founded by myself and Dr. Peter Hoffman. We're both experienced immunologists. We have a scientific advisory board of chemists from Notre Dame and Queen's University. We have a clinical advisory board of MDs from our own UH Cancer Center and the Mayo Clinic. And we have a business advisor who has successfully taken 2 of his own pharmaceutical companies to a successful exit and now works for GlaxoSmithKline. Now, I told you that we're focused on inflammatory bowel disease. And this is a $4 billion a year market. But our treatment isn't limited to inflammatory bowel disease. So it could also be used to treat other inflammatory diseases such as psoriasis, which is a $7 billion a year market. We already have intellectual property for the treatment of colorectal cancer, which is a $10 billion a year market. And it may also be used to treat rheumatoid arthritis, which is a $15 billion a year market. Altogether, these markets are about $36 billion per year. Now, at one point, pharmaceutical companies did all of their drug development work in-house, which means they did discovery, they did research and development, they did clinical trials, and they commercialized. Now, they've actually shifted that model somewhat to the point where they innovate through acquisition, which is great for small companies like ours. And I wanted to give you a couple of examples that are appropriate for comparison to us. In 2008, GlaxoSmithKline licensed a preclinical anti-inflammatory drug for $44 million. Preclinical means that it's never touched a human being. It's not approved by the FDA. It's in a lab somewhere, and there's some results suggesting it might work. $44 million. Just last year, Johnson & Johnson licensed another preclinical compound, specifically for the treatment of IBD for $241 million. So that's what the acquisition market looks like. We're really excited about the potential to make money, the business potential that we have here, but we're even more excited about the potential to help people, because ultimately that's what this is all about. I mentioned bleeding ulcers and pain and not having available treatments to treat your disease. Each one of these people's lives has been affected by inflammatory bowel diseases. And they're all asking the same question, and that's, is anybody out there trying to do anything to make a difference, to make my life better? And the answer to that question is, yes, we are. Thank you.
testing of this and FDA review, FDA approval, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so that is why I have the image at the end where I'm talking about these are preclinical drugs. These are compounds that have not been approved by the FDA. We're early in that process. We have proof of concept in a mouse model and a pending publication in the flagship journal of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, which is the biggest foundation for these types of diseases, in their journal, Inflammatory Bowel Disease Journal. So we have a proof of concept. We have a patent application in for treatment of IBD and treatment of colorectal resulting from it.
So when you say a mouse model, does that mean that you've actually tested this compound on living mice?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Absolutely. So what we've done is we've looked to see that the compound does what we expect it to do in a cell-free system, just looking at molecules going around. Then we took it to a cell system, and we showed that we could take immune cells and we could prevent the spread of inflammation, like I was describing in the other slide. And then we take it up to a model where we can induce a disease in a mouse model that looks very similar to the human disease, and that shows a good track record of tracking potential treatments to human beings to use it.
And that's where you're at right now?
That's exactly where we're at right now.
So is your intent with this company to try and get it acquired long before you ever get FDA approval, after your first human trial? And if it's going to be your first human trial, how long is that going to take before you get approval to do that? And
so my intent is to face forward to go all the way to clinical trials to take this thing as far as it can go, with the understanding that if a good acquisition deal comes along at any point, we will happily present that. Because the reality is, if I don't face forward like that, then our potential acquirers, they'll see that and they won't be interested, because they want to see that we're on the trajectory to take this thing all the way. And they want to jump on it before we cut into that $36 billion
But your molecule is patented?
It is, yes.
Provisional or?
Provisional.
Patent pending. But so your molecule, though, there's no other molecule out there like it. It's not like a Viagra versus Cialis kind of thing.
So our molecule, that's complicated. We have a molecule already, but I would say we also need to do optimization. So the way that we'll approach this is we have what we call a lead. And that compound, that's great. We've patent protected that, and we will continue to move forward with that compound. But we're also going to make derivatives from that, and we'll patent each one of those. And in that way, we can do exactly what you're suggesting, which is protect the space around that, the chemical space around the compound. And in the process, maybe find something that even works better, right? And then focus it on that way.
Yesterday, I really liked it when you started off. Maybe it was because someone made a joke about all the doctors in the room. Was that you, Omar? You said, I'm Dr. Aaron Rose. And that really sets everyone up to pay attention, as opposed to, you're the business development guy who's presenting this. And you can even go a little farther. I'm Dr. Aaron Rose, and I don't know what your specialty, what would that be?
Immunology. But
Okay,
I'm actually a PhD, not an MD, but it's
well, okay, PhD in immunology. Okay, then we're paying attention. This is a substantial player.
May I take notes on my phone?
Yeah.
That's what he's doing.
I just don't want you.
Okay, then the other thing that's really caught my eye was that Javson, I guess it all came from UH, has invested $250 million.
250,000. Did I say million? I apologize.
He said 1,000? No, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, you're right. 1,000. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I wrote that. Yeah, 250,000. Right. But I mean, that's still a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, 250 million. So I want to know, where is that money going? What is that bought? I'd like to see, maybe a little breakdown. Doesn't have to be the whole spreadsheet. And then I want to know, how much are you asking for, and where is that going? And those are. Otherwise, I'm saying this is a nice presentation, but there's no meat there as far as an investment.
So one thing you didn't mention was any side effects of your
of your medicine compared to other side effects of existing medicine. So can you expand on that?
Yeah, so there are no identified potential side effects, which is what makes it exciting, because we actually started looking at this by injecting it in mice, so making it systemic, because that's where you're going to get your side effects, right? When you have a treatment that's circulating throughout the entire body and really going where you don't need it. So we haven't seen any side effects yet. We won't know about side effects until we do a phase 1 clinical trial. So that's another great advantage of being acquired in the preclinical stages, that you don't have to worry about all of these potential side effects. And that is the risk of the acquirer as well.
So the life cycle, and I'm not very familiar with this, but from like the development of this particular drug to FDA approval, what is the average life cycle at? 7 years, 8 years, 10 years?
Yeah, the depends on what stage you're talking about. So if we're talking about approval by the FDA, that's somewhere around 4 to 5 years, but that's approval by the FDA to go into clinical trials. Clinical trials can take another 4 to 5 years. So all told, about 10 years to get to the point where you can get to the
10-year runway. And I guess what I have difficulties on understanding is, like, you know, you've raised 250 grand, which is fantastic, but your runway in front of you is your whole life. It makes it crazy. So I mean, as an investor, there's a lot of risk that hasn't been minimized there. To put a lot of faith that somebody will acquire you, you know, pre-clinical trial. So how do you convince investors that they're going to do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think.
I mean, you can't even buy stamps for 10 years for $250,000. Where's this going? I don't understand where the money's going to come from to get you through 10 with a strong team of educated folks that can make a great salary other places. Are you going to keep the talent around? Like, how are you going to get there?
So we potentially have access to about $2 million worth of federal money to get us through preclinical stages. $2 million for that entire 4-year process, if it's the point where the FDA says it's okay to move into clinical trials, is a reasonable best case scenario, but it may be a little bit more than that. And so I think that will ultimately be the meat that I approach investors for in these early stages.
You got to be quicker with this answer.
So if I can jump in real quick.
Okay.
So what the slides that they have prepped, or the slides from demo day yesterday, they actually have some financial slides that are slightly more in depth. Obviously, they're all early stage, so we're not entirely sure about the accuracy of it necessarily. But he did have a slide that showed like what the ask would be, but we can't show that at demo day because of SEC regulations. So in that slide, I believe you say it's around 2 to 4 million, and you talk about the fact that there's a few $1 million of grants along the way to subsidize that need, right? So, you know, going to.
Yeah, I mean,
medical investments are that way.
Yeah.
You go 0, 0, 0, 0, $1 billion. Hopefully.
Yeah.
One time I have attended.
You know, now that we're on the subject of billions of dollars, so I was talking to this guy yesterday who actually sells pharmaceuticals, and he was at the demo day, and he was talking about the cost of the 10-year period. I threw out $1 billion because that's what we were talking. He says actually more like $4 billion. And so then I was thinking about, well, you have an annual market that's $4 billion. So if you can sell this to every customer, you can, you know, it's a 1-year payback, I guess, once you get it. It makes me wonder. So what is the math that Big Pharma looks at to decide whether it's worthwhile to invest $1 to $4 billion in a drug? So is your market big enough so it pencils out for a GlaxoSmithKline or someone like that? You know, or is there a reason why there isn't a cure for this right now?
The math is really scary, actually, if you get a look at it. And the reason it's scary is because it's valuing people's lives, right? So in the case of a $4 billion a year market, it is enough, as evidenced by the $241 million acquisition last year. But the only reason it is big enough is because it's a disease that lasts your whole life. So that's $4 billion a year over 60 years per patient. Right? So it works in that case, but and why this gets kind of scary is it doesn't always work in the case of cancer treatment, especially if the cancer is very aggressive and it doesn't affect a huge portion of the population because the lifespan of the use of the treatment is very short. And so the cost needs to be extremely high, and then you're competing against chemotherapy therapeutics that might not be as effective but are extremely cheap. So in our case, it works in our favor, and that's part of our focus on a market that might otherwise appear to be small relative to the other pharmaceutical applications.
So $4 billion a year, that's big enough for a big pharma to actually invest a lot of money to take a drug all the way through this.
Because the years are so long.
Right, because the years are so long. No, that's it. That
The
helps a
interesting thing
lot.
is infliximab really kind of changed things because you saw the pie chart. Rheumatoid arthritis is the big player in these chronic inflammatory diseases, and a lot of these drugs, these anti-TNF alpha inhibitors, were developed for rheumatoid arthritis and brought into the IBD market, and so they sort of started. These companies started thinking about these chronic inflammatory inhibitors can be used for a wide variety, and that's why the pie chart has really gotten bigger, because they really showed that you can spread these out to many diseases.
That's actually a very common thing now because the FDA approval takes so long that something that's already been approved, doctors are saying, cannot use this for that,
Yeah,
can't use that for
repurposing.
that, repurposing the medicine, so you don't have to buy 10 years of
Right, no, that makes sense.
brilliance and advice.
So that is part of our strategy now, is to use other models to develop our IP towards all of these diseases, so that we look that much better in regards to potential acquisition.
One thing I was thinking about along the lines of cost and payback and so forth is, pharmaceutical companies aren't in the business of, providing the most cost-effective solution. I don't think that's really their game. So, but why? So why is it specifically that you have such a cost advantage? Was it like a 10 times cost advantage?
Manufacture, so ours is a small molecule, and these other treatments are large proteins, so they're significantly more difficult to manufacture. Stability, small molecules are more stable. The proteins you're going to have to refrigerate. You're going to have to treat them a little bit more like vaccines, and they have to be administered in the hospital. So if you have a pill, you can give someone a bottle of pills. Otherwise, you have to pay a nurse practitioner to set you up on your IV, and you're in the hospital for 3 hours.
Does the fact that it's targeted have to play a role as well? So dosage differences or not really?
Not in the costs.
It's more of a side effect issue. It's a really important.
Right.
We have to show during the SBIR phases the 2 species, not just our mouse model, which showed no side effects, but they want to see 2 other species, usually dogs and rats, and then you can go into the human study. So that's what's down the road of that 4 years.
I mean, would Big Pharma, if they would make, forget about human lives for a second, and just look at the business side, if Big Pharma would be making 10x on the existing medicine that's out there, then they're not going to make those same margins on yours. What's the advantage? I mean, if we take them, obviously we love humans, yada yada, but let's look at the money, right? That's the investable part. So why wouldn't they just buy you for a couple million and throw you off to the side and make more profit on the existing technology?
They might do that.
It's interesting.
They might do that, and in fact, that is regularly done. They just call it shelving a compound.
Yeah.
But I think you addressed that point in your pitch actually, right? Even if we're price comparable, the patients would still
Well,
choose this.
and there's
higher margins actually with your method, right? These are the cost to manufacture, not necessarily the cost to sell.
Yeah, so you could easily make it price comparable, or, so I didn't mention this.
More margin control.
Margin control,
Yeah.
sorry. Or, I didn't mention the fact that there are other drugs out there with high side effects that are also effective that are significantly cheaper. You could, if you wanted to go at a lower price point, beat everybody else out of the market.
The other thing too is if you work with insurance companies may mandate, we will cover this, but we're not going to cover this more expensively. And to the extent that it sounds, insurance is the gorilla in the room.
It's an option.
Yeah.
Yeah, show. What form of company is it? I guess it's been in the financial slides, and how much equity has already been granted, and what are people investing in?
Yeah, so we really are extremely early stage. The investment at this stage is really, what we can do through Xlr8 and the SBIR that we're applying for. So at this point, we're starting from ground zero. We started this company 4 months ago. We started it as an LLC, but based upon their advice, we're going to turn it into a C Corp because it just, I think it sets the right pose for what we want to achieve in the future.
All our teams have to be C-corps in order for us to.
And they graduate.
Right, so.
But we are very early phase.
And you showed a slide of all the good-looking doctors up there. How many of them are in the accelerator working on this?
So it's just Peter and I working on this. Our chemistry partners are going to help us do the optimization of the molecules, and our clinical advisors are going to work in an advisory capacity to help us stay on the right track for moving towards moving through. You have to carefully design your preclinical work in order to make it appropriate for the kind of clinical trials that we need to run, especially when you have clinical trials for chronic disease and it's kind of complex. So these guys have that.
They're paid consultants, essentially.
Yeah.
So, but Dr. Hoffman, he's coming to the.
He's right behind you.
Right there.
And the voice in the back.
I got a young guy. Yeah.
So who's the CEO, who's the CFO, where's the hierarchy structure?
So I'm the CEO at this stage. I'll be handling the business, and Peter will be working.
Technology development and getting grants and publishing papers and, so that's kind of how we divide it up. He's the business guy and I'm trying to help build the science.
And our business advisor will probably be the first of many, and that's also about establishing connections in the pharmaceutical community. So he's already introduced me to their venture capital arm, GlaxoSmithKline, because each one of these pharmaceutical companies has their own venture capital arm. So I'm trying to establish relationships with those folks so I can feed them our milestones and let them know where we are, and whisper in their ear about how interested this other pharmaceutical company is.
Speaking of that, is your molecule well known? I mean, do people talk about it? Do the majors already know about it, or are you guys still under the radar?
We're still under the radar with respect to therapeutic use, but the molecule is known with regards to its function. So it's been identified and it's been used in other scientific research.
But the added value I think the Notre Dame folks give us is they have a great track record for taking the lead, making it better through their modeling, and then their organic chemist, which is Paul Elquist, builds your new chemistry that makes yours unique and better. And that's the value that we think we're going to add with those guys. They're fantastic. We work with them academically, so we already are pretty confident they're going to really help us out.
Then we have a new molecular entity, something that no one's identified before. So that significantly strengthens our IP. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Aaron. So just a little bit of background more on the Xlr8uh side, necessarily than Biologic specifically, but we all know it's hard to invest in biotech. We all know that it takes close to a decade, if not longer, sometimes for a return, potentially. So what we wanted to do with Biologics is we didn't want to necessarily not include all of the the great biotech development, drug discovery that's happening at the university. So what we're trying to do, both on our side of the accelerator, is go after a lot of these national grants to help supplement along that runway that it takes for the biotech. So we hope to support Biologics both in not only from our equity investment standpoint, but also non-dilutive funds along the way, and then also work with them as they go on to get a lot of non-dilutive funds, SBIR, SCTR, NIH funds, et cetera, over this process. And that's exactly why we have the two different phases. So even if they don't necessarily come back for phase 2 immediately, maybe as they're gearing up to actually get ready for seed stage funding, say 6 months or a year from now, they can come back in our program. We'll get them all investor ready again, hopefully have a few $1 million in grants along the way, so that really what we're looking for at that point is just to top off that seed round with the dilutive funding. So that's kind of the strategy. It's a long-term play, obviously, and as Aaron mentioned, he's just right out of the gates. He's only 4 months into this so far. So Omar said they were such a horrible team, but we had to take them in anyway. No, he said they were such a great team that we couldn't pass up this opportunity, and we're really grateful that they're one of our first biotechs in our program.